Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today we're getting into a question that sits at the heart of safety performance. Why do technically sound safety systems so often fail to change behaviour? My guest is Eduardo Blanco-Muñoz, Group HSC Director, Professor and author of Human Factors and Safety Culture. We explore how perception, bias and overconfidence shape risk, why people don't behave the way systems expect them to, and what leaders can actually do to influence behaviour in the real world. This is a conversation that moves beyond rules and compliance and into the psychology and leadership that really drive safety outcomes. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Eduardo.
Thank you for having me, Christian.
It's good to connect, and been looking forward to this as a fellow author. I'm really interested to hear about your experiences of releasing your book. So we'll get onto that very, very soon. But just to start with, you've worked in safety since I think 2000. You've worked in different industries, different countries. What were the sort of moments of either frustration or insight or sort of some kind of experience anyway that convinced you that the sort of human factors and culture mattered more than maybe most organizations would think?
Well, I think that my experience is quite traditional in the sense that, my academic background is some sciences, hard sciences, we could say, then engineering. And when you go through this kind of training, everything looks easy, and you tend to look for technical solutions to most things, and everything appears to be regulated or regulated enough. So people just have to go with the system, and if people go with the system and don't make mistakes, everything should be fine. Pretty soon you realize that that's not reality, and that there are limitations to this mechanistic approach. People don't yield to instructions if they don't feel that there is a point to them. And quite quickly I realized that there was a hole in that health and safety training that had been given. So I was curious, and I started digging on my own and searching, reading, going to conferences, and eventually building my own programs and presenting them in conferences, and that led me to this writing bit and teaching as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's always interesting thinking about that transition from the theoretical into what happens in the real world, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's I think it's one of the things that is behind all these trends that we are seeing emerging in the 2000s. I mean, new views and safety difference and so on, is people realizing that just the theoretical, technical, and organizational training that we have received, it's not enough. You really need to develop these skills around that.
Yeah. So in terms of the book, we'll get into the content of the book in a minute, but just to start with, kind of how's that gone? How's that process been for you since you launched the book? What kind of feedback or reactions have stood out to you most, and what's it been like as an experience?
Well, it's been great, as you can imagine, having the comments and the questions, the remarks of different people. The book has been well received, and the critics has been pretty good. So it's a challenging, as you know, as an author yourself, it's a challenging thing to start writing. I didn't really start from scratch. I had published a series of articles in a French technical paper called Technique de l'ingénieur, and I thought that would be easy enough, to combine these articles and to make a book out of them. But the process was much more challenging than I had expected. At the end, it was rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, similar to you, with my book, I sort of started with a chunk of the content kind of already there.
Hmm.
And the biggest challenge I found was just having the focus, because obviously there's all sorts of other things bombarding you in life and business
Absolutely.
and whatever, and just having that sort of. I think if I had um, sat down religiously and done a certain amount every day, I could have done the whole book in maybe 6 months at a good pace. But actually, it took
Hmm.
me probably about 3 years end to end.
That's it. It's very difficult to really say, okay, I sit down and I do just that. If you have a
Yeah.
personal and family life on the side, it's tough. It's very time consuming.
Yeah, unless you're a professional author, but we haven't quite got to that point. I'm not sure if there are any professional authors in the health and safety field. If I don't know if there's enough copies of books that are sold to
I,
manage that, but we'll have to look into that.
Mhm.
Um, so if anybody hasn't read the book yet, what would you say is the kind of core argument of the book? And it's called Human Factors and Safety Culture.
Mhm.
If you want to, um, as we as Eduardo and I are talking, if you want to get on Amazon and start buying it, that's what it's called.
Sure. So we're saying for me, there is a lot of literature and very interesting things that have been said about safety culture, as the social dimension of what goes on at the workplace. And then there's a lot of literature and very interesting pieces that have been written about the human factors,
Yeah,
everything related with cognition. You have classics on those both areas. But in my opinion, there was a bit of a gap between these two worlds, between this macro level, meso level that we call, and then the micro level of the individual. And
hmm,
I found interesting this concept of attitudes and values as a bridge between these two levels, because as an individual, what really drives your attitudes and your behavioral preferences is first what you perceive as a risk in your environment, of course, but then also and maybe mostly your values, what you give importance to, and your
yeah,
beliefs. What do you think
hmm,
it's really possible? What could happen to you? What's probable? What works? What doesn't work? And that's the individual level. That's what drives us daily. But you can also have this at the social level. If you can call a culture a culture, it's because we have a group of people that share values and share beliefs,
yeah,
and those two things are very difficult to really describe and identify and measure. But what you can actually do is to try and figure what are the artifacts, the cultural artifacts that this population deploys, and it is by these artifacts that you convey these values and these beliefs. So I try to put this loop into display, and I try to figure how at organizational level you can put together these artifacts that could convey these values and beliefs that could orient the behaviors of people. It's at some level, I guess, a bit of neuroscience involved, a bit
yeah,
of psychology, a lot of sociology. Would you combine all these disciplines? And there are a lot of books and a lot of authors that have gone into that area, not only in the health and safety sphere, of course, people coming from all sectors and from many different disciplines. I think that we have all today a very consistent approach that could be used to really operationalize this stuff. Because the critics that you get when you get into this theoretical, thinking is that, okay, this is blah, and this is maybe not applicable to us, and the workplace is not really so easy to define, to describe, to understand. I think that today we do have a good theoretical basis to analyze these things, and most importantly, to operationalize
yeah.
these concepts and to deploy them properly in the workplace.
Yes, yeah. Everyone thinks they're special, and everyone is special in a sense. But every business has a unique something about it. But so much stuff is as you identified there. It's all about humans, isn't it? And we're all kind of similar in a sense of the beliefs and the values and all of that stuff. So yeah, lots and lots to unpack.
Mhm.
Um, so you mentioned about sort of that sort of theoretically, technically sound safety system. But why is it that those which I guess do exist, but they don't manage to achieve what they want to, they don't really achieve a change in behavior and therefore the right sort of outcomes.
Well, I think that first of all, you have to have a good understanding of what are your challenges in terms of risks, and there is a lot of things that you can achieve just by deploying the risk assessments and the GSAs and this kind of stuff, and that's an important piece. And I'm of course not neglecting that, and nobody should. This is the kind of the basics, but there are limitations to that. And pretty soon, as I mentioned before, practitioners and organizations are confronted to those limits, and it's where you get to this very famous plateau, and you start scratching your head and say, what could be done different, or what else can we do to go through that and improve our results. And this is what I believe, this kind of strategic thinking about humans and about organization is important. And I believe, as I said, that there's a lot of things that have been researched, and a lot of academic papers, and a lot of practical experiences that can be used today to really look for solutions. I humbly propose a perspective and a set of tools, because the point of this book was to link the theory with practicalities. So it comes with a toolbox that proposes a series of things that, as I mentioned before, I will risk the word again, could operationalize these concepts. So I think that's important to really maybe take a bit of a perspective and look for different solutions, because there are many things that can be applied to occupational health and safety today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if we think about human factors, where do people still go wrong in that space? What are the kind of common challenges that you see, or sort of failings, without using too strong a word, that you can experience?
That's an excellent question. And the thing is that we are today in 2026 still very much impregnated, but that vision of humans as rational individuals, and that goes back to the early 1900s and the neoclassical economics. We consider people as, pretty much rational in the sense of having access to relevant information, being able to process that information, having the resources, the cognitive resources to do it properly, and to very seldom get it wrong. So this is how we tend to consider people. I mean, in most organizations, people are not supposed to make mistakes, and that's of course something that doesn't fit well with reality. If you expect people to behave as robots, well, just build robots and forget about people, because people come with a lot of qualities, a lot of strengths, but also with a set of, fallibilities, limits.
Yes.
And this is maybe something that is not so obvious for organizational people, for engineers that are, setting the workplaces, for managers who are supposed to manage people for the best, and even for individuals. Me and you, everybody is sometimes surprised by the fact of failing. Come on, how stupid I was. That's happened to all of us. We don't think that we are supposed to get it wrong. We think that we have the tools, the mental tools, the abilities to get it right, and we do. But sometimes we will fail, and it's important to find what are these weaknesses, what are these accident-prone spots, and it's today, as I mentioned before, a lot of research has gone very deep into that, and we have a good knowledge about what we need to tend to. But again, it's not so obvious. It's a bit counterintuitive. All of us, when you look in the mirror to yourself, we believe that we are able to cope with danger and to cope with, a volatile world and uncertainties and so on. It's not so easy. And if you take a step back, a bit of perspective, you can realize how difficult it is for us to really live our lives in this complex world.
Yeah. And therefore how difficult it is to keep people safe within whatever system that you have in place. Obviously, yeah, makes perfect sense. And I suppose that a lot of that, what you just said, is kind of about perception, isn't it? So, why would you say perception is so important in safety? And then how do people's expectations shape what they see, what they miss, or maybe what they misinterpret?
Well, perception is one of the areas that I wanted to dig in. It's not the only one. I mean, the whole concept of cognition, how we get the information that we get and how we handle it and what do we do with it. It's complex and it's not so straightforward. But yes, perception is the first step that I wanted to look into because, as I said before, it looks so obvious for all of us. We do believe and we really operate under the impression of having access to all the information that we need to have to work without having any problem, without having any accident. And that's so far from the truth, or there are so obvious limits to our perception, starting with just anatomical limits. We only have two eyes. They both point forward. So there are so many blind spots around us that we don't see and that we don't consider. Our brain operates under this principle. It's a very simple principle. It's what I don't see, what I don't perceive, doesn't exist. So for us, our reality is what we get as inputs from our senses, and we are happy with that. And it's something that it makes sense, from an evolutionary standpoint. If we're afraid or stressed about everything that we don't perceive, we'll be stressed during most of our lives, because we have these limits to our perception. So our brain has accommodated to these limits, and it kind of reassures us. We don't have this perpetual stress about all the facts, all the information that we are missing. And this is, again, very, very counterintuitive. When you speak with operators at any plant or with, in any business, people are always surprised when you do this pretty easy, tests and games with them to demonstrate them all the information that they are missing every single instant. Most of us are very surprised.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me though, hearing that. But it probably would if I did the test. So it's interesting how that sort of, we can understand the theory of something and then kind of notionally get it, but when it's going back to what we said earlier about emotions and stuff, it's when you're there in that situation yourself, it's a different scenario. Go on.
No, I just was to say I put some games and some tests in the book as well. But for me, the most explicit and easy to see example is after you have a little accident with your car. You hit somebody with another car. The very first thing that you used to hear when you step off your car is the other person saying, "My God, I didn't see you." And that person is honestly surprised by the fact of having hit your car. It's not just bullshitting you. It's really an honest, surprise for the person to not having seen you, because we are all so persuaded that we are, as I said, collecting and analyzing all the information that we need when you're driving.
Yeah. My guilty, not my guilty pleasure, but my sort of, I'll guiltily, what's the right word? I'll share what I do in this scenario, which is I blame other people. So if I do something, it's always someone else's fault, not my fault. So it's kind of, for me, it's about taking more sort of ownership when things happen is the challenge that I have to overcome. That's probably my big cognitive bias.
It's something that happens to all of us. It's very difficult for us to question our abilities, and it's easier and maybe more satisfying or less challenging psychologically to project blame and instead of owning
it. Yeah. Which cognitive bias would you say is the sort of most challenging, or the one that most undermines, I guess, safety performance, and what and why?
Well, cognitive biases are something that we, of course, I do those in my book. It's a very broad concept, and you have biases affecting every different level of our cognition. When we talk about higher cognition, you'll have biases affecting your judgment and so on, but you can have also biases affecting your attention, affecting your perception. So at each one of these cognitive levels, you'll have different biases. Maybe the most relevant, or at least the best known, is everything that affects judgment, because it's easier to realize those and to pinpoint them. I think that one of the most significant and relevant things that we have to cope with in the health and safety trade is overconfidence. It's most people are pretty sure that they are able to cope with danger. As I was mentioning, we are seldom questioning our ability to perceive, to pay attention what we need to be attended to be vigilant, to remain focused, and to have the good reasoning. So we tend to be overconfident, and that push us to accept maybe an unreasonable level of risk. It's unreasonability became obvious only when accident happens, of course.
Yeah. Would you say that that sort of exists, that overconfidence could also exist at a sort of corporate level as well? So that's, on an individual level, we think we can do this and we think we'll be fine and so on. Is there something at a kind of organizational level, which is, well, we've got these controls in place, we've got this culture, we haven't seen these incidents, therefore we're fine. Does that overconfidence kind of show there as well?
Absolutely. As I was mentioning before, one of the points of my book, and I believe that the main one is trying to bridge this individual level with the organizational level. And most of the things that we look into when we address the individual limitations and fallibility, we find when we look at organizations. And yes, confidence is one of the big things. Plus other things, you have groupthink that adds to that, and you have a lot of sociological phenomenon that will bring people to maybe discount risk, because you have incentives that are pushing you to play in that direction. When you're heading an organization or you're having a managerial role in an organization, you have, of course, this safety responsibility, and you have to tend to risk. And I honestly don't believe that any individual would willingly risk the life or the health of a colleague for the sake of profit. But when you're in an organizational context and you're working for a for-profit organization, that's a very real and a very daily pressure that you have on you. And you cannot just focus only on health and safety, as you cannot only focus on quality, and you cannot only focus on innovation. It's a whole, and at the end of it, you have also a bottom line, and you have this profitability that is the main axis when it comes to organizing job in the frame of an organization. And is really something that you can feel daily, whatever your position in an organization. So it's complex. It's a complex setting, and it's difficult to analyze. But I think that, again, as I said before, we have today a solid understanding of the main principles of what's going on in organizations, so we can really have the tools to orient organizations in the sense that we want to give them.
Yeah. You mentioned there that feeling, and something I wanted to ask was, you said about safety leadership is not a title but a behaviour. So kind of thinking about that, feelings and behaviours. So what behaviours matter most in practice when it comes to safety leadership?
Well, I think that I will not be very original, but leading by example is the most important thing that the leader needs to take into account, because that really reveals what are your values and what are your beliefs. It's easy and cheap to talk. You can really make a lot of posters and e-learnings and whatever you want to do. I mean, that's fine and that's nice, but there's a gap between those messages and what people realize when they look at you and what you do and what you prioritize and what you put your money. That's really what reveals what's important and what you prioritize. Then, of course, you also have the feedback that you provide to people. I think that's the second pillar, how you are able to convey by how you respond to other people's behavior, what are your expectations, what you really favor, what you tolerate, what you don't tolerate, what you reward, what you don't reward. So that's again maybe basic behaviorism, but still very relevant today. And other than that, it's and I think that I try to develop that in the book as well. You have a set of tools that you can put in place in an organization that will demonstrate what's important to you and what's important to your organization. And that's very, very, very large. I talk about a set of 14 tools. So you can look at them, and they're very diverse. And of course, they need to be customized. It's not a kind of one size fits all, but it's kind of giving you the families or the main families of what you could think about, so you can develop your own tools into that.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of that approach because, as I think my idea in the world of slips is to take a more scientific approach, and therefore
Mm.
putting in tools and making culture kind of more scientifically grounded really sort of appealed to me. Um, what does that look like in practice, I suppose? And then maybe just pick on a couple of those tools and kind of give us a bit of an overview of what they are and how they work and how they benefit people.
So maybe the principle, the main tool that we could pinpoint is the level of awareness and of focus that leadership puts on something, and that's again quite broad, but you can try to look for your own ways of exemplifying that. So typically, it's what you measure and what you try to manage. What are the incentives that you put in place? Incentives that could be financial, but also not non-financial. That any kind of reward system that you put in place. It's important. It's maybe the most relevant thing. The thing about those is it's very easy to get it wrong. With the best intentions, you can put in place incentives, schemes, and measurements and KPIs that are not really helping you improving safety. It could really backfire. The typical example, and there's a lot of discussion about that, like since forever. Is the injury frequency rate. Is that a good
Yeah.
KPI? Is that what motivates people to do a better job? I honestly don't think it's really helpful, but you have a lot of organizations that really laser focus on that, and especially at higher levels of leadership. That's the only figure that they consider, and that's what in their minds is demonstrating that the safety is improving or not. So
Mhm.
it's important to really review these tools and what are you focusing on to make sure that it's really providing you with the necessary information to pilot the process. If you're focusing on the wrong things, it's difficult to progress.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. And as you say, it's important to underline, isn't it, that these things are all done with good intentions. They're not done in a deliberate way to achieve the wrong outcomes. People, as you said earlier, nobody wants to see a colleague die or be seriously injured or anything like that. That just doesn't happen. Well, there's probably obviously there are psychopaths out there in the world, but that's 0.0001 or percent or whatever it is. But generally speaking, people are trying to do the right thing. It's just they haven't got the frameworks, the strategy right to be able to do that.
Mhm. And again, that's a problem, especially again if you look at the top management. There is what I believe I touch a word on those in the book. We could call the illusion of understanding.
Mm.
Most people, and especially again very smart people at CEO level and like at board level, believe that they understand how safety could be managed and how people should be managed. And I mean, maybe some of them do have a good understanding, but I think that we as safety professionals, we need to provide them with a vision, as you said, and with the good tools to approach this thing. Because for most people, again, I'm not just focused on leadership, but all of us, it's quite easy not to have an accident. You just need to pay attention. You just need to follow the rules. You need to follow procedures, and that's it. You have put everything that it needs. You got the PPE, you got your training. Come on, guys, make an effort and don't get hurt. So if it was so easy, nobody would be having accidents today. But it's a vision that is quite prevalent among
Mm.
many of us. About middle management, field workers, and CEOs. We
Yeah.
need to really provide them with a better understanding of how human people work and how can be done at an organizational level to really drive behaviors in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. So trying to move safety from I guess the old adage of it being a number one priority to actually a lived value, I guess, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Values is something that has been, a word that has become part of the safety jargon, and I think it's a concept that deserves a closer inspection because it's again, I touch a word on that on the book is at neurobiological level. Today we have a wealth of evidence of how values are really driving our behaviors. Every cognitive process that we have been mentioning is really underlined by these values. And again, I will not get into the detail of what I've already written, but if you're interested in how values really drive behaviors at an affective level, I think that you got a good door into really making people do what they need to do to be safe.
Mm, mm. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. What idea or ideas in the book do you think might make some sort of more traditional safety professionals feel a bit uncomfortable?
I'm not trying to make anybody feel uncomfortable, of course, but what I'm expecting is to provide with maybe a perspective that could broaden, the vision and provide people with different levers. If you just get stuck into these command and control strategies, and you're trapped in a mechanistic view of the world, in which you just need to give instructions and people will just follow them and will never get wrong. You will keep on having accents. So
Yeah.
I'm not again intending to make anybody to profoundly review their worldviews, but just to raise some questions, about how people need to be managed and what are the best strategies to manage people so as to make them adhere to your values and to orient effectively their behaviors. It's yeah, maybe I guess that people that are really very, very much into this command and control and mechanistic view of the world could be surprised and could not agree. It could seem far-fetched or maybe idealistic, to really try to orient behaviors. Behavior is really a complex thing, We are all different, as you said, and we don't really see the world the same way. We will have the same reasoning and so on, but there are nevertheless some tools that could help us in orienting attitudes, and by that through that approach drive behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. Have you got any examples or case studies or anything like that, stories of kind of moving from that very rule-based safety approach, as you say, very sort of draconian way, command and control, to safety being managed in a more kind of dynamic system kind of way?
Mhm. Well, I've been trying to drive that evolution in the different companies that I've worked for. Other than those very visible and public case studies, I could give you a couple of those. I have a good friend of mine and a neighbor, as a matter of fact, who's the health and safety VP of L'Oréal, living here in Paris. But he's an English chap, Malcolm Staves, who has done a huge job in L'Oréal in trying to operate that transition. Has been at that for several years now. I will not say how many because I'm not sure, but I think that he has been very successful in driving this process, because it is a process. It's not something that will operate overnight. If you're expecting, just by asking people to think differently to do so, it will not work. You have to really review your structures, your processes, and then by that exercise, you can really then bring people with you. It's not just by telling people that they need to think or perceive or judge differently or behave differently. You need to put in place the structures and the processes that really embody that way of thinking, so people can adhere to that.
Yeah, yeah. I know Malcolm. He actually did a little forward for my book. So so he may have done the same for yours. I'm not sure, but yeah, he's a good guy. I need to get Malcolm on actually. If you listen to this, Malcolm, which I'm sure you will, to call out to get you on the podcast as well. We could maybe do a roundtable in French.
That could be nice.
Although my French is very rusty compared to yours, I'm sure, and Malcolm's. I did French for my degree, but that was many moons ago. Some people might join us today, listen to what you're saying, and say, yes, it sounds very interesting, but when push comes to shove and someone gets really seriously hurt, surely it's all about the rules and the enforcement, and they have to come first. What would you say to that?
First, it's the danger of hindsight. When you look at an accident, it's always easy to say, okay, this guy didn't do what he needed to do, or this piece of equipment wasn't maintained, or this was not the right way of doing things. And that's a danger. And every time you do an incident investigation, you need to be very aware of that, and not forget the complexity and how people are not that stupid, and people are not trying to get hurt. It's they're trying to balance. It's what Holnagle calls this thoroughness, efficiency trade-off. So it's always a balancing game, and we are all doing it all the time. So it's, if you really want to play it safe and have zero accidents, you should stop any kind of activity and get into a cave and forget about the world. So it's, if you're producing anything and you're in economic activity, you need to accept some amount of risk, and you need to count on people to manage that risk. There's always an amount of discretion at every level. People will need to make judgments and to cope with risk. So the first thing is to accept that, and the second thing is to make people understand that we live in a complex world, and even the what appears to be the most basic operations will entail complexity, and whenever you have complexity, you have risk. So it's not so easy to say, okay, just put in place the rules, just train people, just give them the right tools, and they will have everything they need to work safely. There's always risk that you cannot foresee, things that you can foresee, but you don't get to control and master as well as you could expect you would do. So there will always be ways of getting it wrong, and you need to put in place the necessary structures to we talk a lot today about resilience. Resilience is about that. It's about, okay, we are fragile. Everything that we produce as human is going to be fragile because we are fallible. So we could put in place fallible systems. So how we try to do the best we can to make sure that these systems stand the test of daily work.
I think resilience is almost the most important skill, if you can call it a skill, that people can have and systems can have, because things will go wrong. Nothing's perfect. Nothing will ever go to plan. It's all about how you bounce back from that, isn't it? Certainly, I mean, I know you've got kids, and I've got 2 boys, and being resilient is something I'm really trying to engender and teach to them, because I just think that is so important.
It is. And then the thing is that as an organization, we need to privilege organizational resilience, and not expect people to be resilient. Of course, it's a quality, and we need it, in our personal lives as in our professional lives. But it's not as easy, as say, okay, people, be resilient. We need to make sure that we try and construct this resiliency into our systems and into our ways of conducting our business. And that's, for me, maybe the starting point, to really embed this into our organizational thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple of questions from me. Firstly, what would you, a bit of a controversial one maybe, what would you most like to see the safety professions stop doing? So if you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to see stopped?
I think, I'm not going to say that all safety professionals have the same issues or the same limits, but I think that one very common one is to tell people what they need to do. I think that we as safety professionals, we need to listen a lot. We need to, of course, to bring in our expertise and our the experiences that we may have gained, but people on the front line and everyone in the system, they have also a lot of experience, that they have a lot to say. So I think that we gain more by asking than by telling people what to do. So I think that this is literally something that I ask my teams in my health and safety structure is be less prescriptive and be more open to what people have to say, and then you can maybe challenge those assumptions and bring your own expertise. Second thing that I will come back to this matter of indicators and KPIs is we really need to help our boards, our CEOs, our managers in general, to step back from these classical, lost time injury frequency rates and the like, and maybe not stop producing them, because it's important and it's kind of the final result of what we do. But it's not by looking at that and crossing your fingers that you will improve those. You really need to put your focus in measuring progress, but by measuring efforts. For me, it's decide whatever tools you want to implement. And again, I give a series of examples, but there are literally thousands of ways of trying to improve your safety performance, and focus on how do you deploy those tools. Focus on how you're helping leaders in being effective in doing that, and focus on how you're empowering your employees to follow those rules and to follow those practices, and try to keep track on how those processes are progressing or not. And if you see that those are stuck in somewhere, maybe you need to review those processes and those tools and reinvent them, or to modify them in some way, or just drop them all together and find different ones. But for me, that's prevention. Prevention starts with what you do to avoid having accidents. If you spend your time in counting accidents and doing incident investigations, well, you're maybe losing the point.
Yes, agree. And there's a lesson there for the insurance world, because the insurance world spends a lot of time on claims defensibility, which is kind of sophisticated loss side of things. And then last question, for the safety professional joining us today who feels maybe a bit stuck, lots of responsibility, maybe limited influence, where should they start if they want to drive real behavioral change within their organization?
It's an excellent point, because it's the case of, I would not say most, but many safety professionals that are confronted to limited resources, limited visibility, limited prioritization of safety. I would say, hang on. It's always difficult to be a support function. When you're not producing the product or whatever your company is selling, your influence would always be limited, and you'll always be confronted to competition for scarce resources. That's normal, and that's fine. You need to find a way to make visible that you're contributing to the business, that you're contributing to something important that is keeping your workforce alive and healthy. And the easiest way to make this value visible is again, decide what are the tools and what are the practices and what are the rituals that embody the safety value that you want to implement and that to develop, and find a way to monitor them so your leadership can effectively help you in monitoring that, because they need to own this monitoring. They need to be the ones piloting this strategy and making sure that whatever initiative that you want to deploy is effectively being deployed. So if you just complain to your boss that he's not or she's not paying attention to safety, ask yourself that question: is I am providing these guys with the relevant information and with the relevant vision so they can make the right choices? Maybe you are, and maybe these guys are just deaf to whatever you want to tell. Well, in that case, you're unlucky. You may need to look for a job, but maybe you could do something to improve that perception and that ownership of your leadership by producing maybe a clearer vision of what is the current situation and what you could do to improve that and where you want to get.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Eduardo. That was really, really interesting. Learned a lot, and so much more we could have delved into, but we've given people a bit of a snapshot. Where can people find the book? Where's the best place to follow you or connect with you and continue the conversation?
Well, quite typically in LinkedIn. So if you want to join my network, just drop me an invite. And the book you can get from Amazon, or you can go to Routledge. The book has been published by CRC Press, which is the same company, Taylor and Francis. So if you go to routledge.com, you can have the access to it with no delivery fees. It's delivered for free wherever you are in the world. So maybe that's the best way to get it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining, and hope that people that joined us today got a lot out of this, as I did, and look forward to continuing the conversation and keeping in touch on LinkedIn and making the world a safer place.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thanks for everything that you do for achieving that very noble objective.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.